Welcome. Welcome to the humanistic webinar organized on each third Wednesday of the month by Berlin Practical Philosophy International Forum. Today's webinar is devoted to philosophy in cartoons, but not any kind of cartoons, but very special one, Olibot. Olibot authoress Erika Sabo, an illustrator born in the US, living in Barcelona, staying right now in Berlin, is our guest. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm honored to have you, and I hope you will ask today. You will be asked an endless number of questions, and you will answer all of them. So it's like hot seat for you because you represent actually the art today.
Oh.
And philosophy is represented by the second guest, Professor Chris Koprowski from Apollo University. Welcome, Chris.
Hello, it's nice to be with you.
Okay, my name is Maya Nesru. I'm chairwoman and host of this webinar. And also somebody who is responsible for all technicalities. So before we dive into discussion about philosophy, about art, about the stories in cartoon, and maybe searching for an authentic self, one technical remark. All those who are with us live and all those who are watching this video on YouTube are very welcome to post your comments, questions, remarks in the chat box on the right side or then below under this video, because discussion is a very important part of philosophical investigation. And right now, Erika, I have a question for you. Please tell us, who is the Olibot and who are you in professional way? Because I introduced you very, very briefly.
Well, I was born in the U.S. I worked there for many years as a designer and later on as a creative director, worked in San Francisco and London. And then about 10 years ago, I left the U.S. and moved to Barcelona. And that's when I really decided that I wanted to begin well, I started experimenting with illustration.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for this introduction. I just said a couple of words, and now I'm just waiting for your presentation because I know you will show us the Olibot, and probably ours will speak for itself.
Okay. Let's see. I will see if I can share my screen here. Okay. Are you seeing Olibot?
We are seeing Olibot.
Well, Olibot is an awesome robot, and it starts actually. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show a few slides from a larger story. So I won't show you the entire comic, but this story starts on the planet Ololium. And Ololium is a planet somewhere in outer space in the future, and it's kind of a really strange planet because it's half metal plates, so it's half very, very industrial, and then partly organic too, because it has sort of these oozing swamps everywhere, and nobody really knows much how it got this way. It's kind of a mystery to everybody. And it also has a big pipe on the bottom where periodically it spews garbage into outer space. So it's a pretty weird place. And it's inhabited by the violent and terrible Midbots. And these are horrible Midbots who are, they have wings that are metal wings with retractable machine guns, and they love blowing things up and destroying things and uglifying things. That's really kind of what turns them on. So they're also they have a groupthink device on their head, and they acted as one big force. They don't really act individually, but but they're really much more one giant unthinking, malevolent force. So they have kind of a strange way of being born. And what happens is, in these cesspools on the planet, bubbles start to form, and then the Nidbots gather around, and of course they've seen this millions and millions of times before, but they still think this is really interesting and funny, and you can see they're sort of jumping up and down there. And then eventually what happens is a Nidbot spurts out head first, lands head first with a big crash, and they fall on the ground laughing because they think this is hysterically funny. And then they all go off with the new Nidbot and they blow something up to celebrate. And this goes on for forever until day something happens that really is totally unexpected. The bubbles start to form, and just as usual, something spurts out, but it's not a Nidbot. What's and just to review, the Nidbots have no independent reasoning capability. They totally conform. They're awesomely destructive. They're mean and unfriendly. And actually, the creature that comes out is totally different. He's curious and friendly. He has a total inability to conform. He has a disturbing tendency towards original thinking. He has no groupthink device. He has a propeller instead. He has ridiculous bird wings, so that means he has no weapons capability at all. And he's just totally different. And, he tries to fit in for a while and follow them around and be friends because, he wants friends like all of us. But um, they, they, they just don't like him. So what happens is they throw him down the garbage chute and he's expulsed from the planet. So this begins his dark period, and he's floating around in outer space, being among all this space junk and garbage that's floating by, and he's pretty depressed, and he's wondering why he has to be himself and why he couldn't be a Nidbot like the rest of them, and why did he have to be different, and then he gets hit by banana peels in the face and things like that, and this goes on for a long, long, long time, until one day he sees an old burned out carcass of an old fossil fuel dog floating by, and he collects it because he's collecting all this garbage. He's actually building a platform to live on with all this garbage and everything, and he kind of sits there and looks at it and thinks, gosh, it would be so nice if this dog were alive and he could be my friend, but the dog is not alive. It's an old burned out carcass, and I won't go into the details of how it happens, but actually somehow he manages to revive him. And so now he has a companion, Oxydog. And Oxydog is a misfit, defective, just like him, because he's always popping off his rusty bits. So this is why his spots are always moving around. And so the two of them become companions. And Oxydog is kind of the wiser one of the two. They're inseparable. Olibot gets his mojo back. He's feeling better. He has a friend now, and the two of them construct a botcupator because Olibot has discovered he actually likes to create things. So they construct a big botcupator, and they throw junk that they've collected from floating by in space into the botcupator, and they actually make the bot friends, the bot 7. And so besides Olibot and Oxydog, there are actually 5 more. There's Lollybot. She's a master hacker. She looks innocent but she's actually quite a computer genius. She's addicted to lollipops. There's Bedobot. He's a martial arts expert, but he has a problem. Misfit, just like all the rest of them, his feet stick, and so it's really hard for him to move around. He makes a popping noise whenever he walks. There's Bladebot, and Bladebot has the problem that he has this stiff metal finger that sticks up So this, of course, leads to a lot of misunderstandings, but he's actually a pretty good guy. There's Bloodbot, who is a vampire, but he has the problem that he's too shy to bite. So he's anemic, spends most of his time hiding behind things or inside his cave. And then there's Honeybot. She's an information extraction specialist, and she has man radar, and that's how she gets her information. So the bot seven are weird, and it's okay. In fact, it's awesome, and that's kind of the essential message of the group. And they get into the spaceship that they've constructed, and this is where the story ends at this point. They go off and have adventures, and I don't really know exactly what the adventures are, but certainly the adventures will be to make the planet safe for being different. So that's Olibot.
Thank you. I love the story. I love this topics or those problems about being a misfit, finding our own place in the world, but also about this problem or this issue, or maybe there's a topic like friendship. Zophilia, we have talked about that on the last webinar, but I would like to ask additional question. We always wish, to have this opportunity to ask artists about the genesis of his or her work. So this time I use this possibility, and I would like to know how did you come up with the idea of the Olibot? What is the genesis?
Well, the funny thing is, I didn't really create the story. It was something that just happened because I told you that I worked in internet consulting in the U.S. for many years, and I was working with. I started as a designer and wanted to be a designer because I love the visual, and then I found myself through the years working on big brands for big companies, big corporations, and working with branding issues. And and when I moved to Spain 10 years ago, um, I was sort of curious if there was really anything left inside. It's one thing to be a designer and have a problem to solve. You're working on a particular piece of communication, or there's a particular the client always has a problem to solve. But was there anything inside that came out of me? That was really what I was curious about. So I took my camera and started taking pictures of street art or interesting objects or whatever, and then I started to sketch, which I hadn't done. I had been artistic as a child, but really had not done that for years and years and years. And so this funny-looking creature kind of popped up, Olibot, and he was a robot with wings, and um, he looked a little forlorn and everything, and so I sort of kept refining him, and then I sort of started to play with the visual part of it, and I started creating other bots, playing with the idea of a robot with wings, but it was all wordplay at that point. So I created a, um, a creature I called Combat, and he had a helmet, and he was a military guy, so that was a wordplay on combat. And then there was Cowbot, who was a cowboy. He, the robot with wings, but he had a cowboy hat and boots and everything. So that was a play on cowboy. And then there was Bimbot, and she had, enormous breasts. She was a play on bimbo. Um, so, so it was really just a visual idea at that point. And then I kept playing with it, and I kind of liked the visual aspect. I thought they were kind of funny and everything. And I thought, well, I don't know, is anybody going to be interested in this if he doesn't have a story? And I started thinking about what the story could be, and it seemed to me that his personality was, he's friendly and mischievous, and I kind of envisioned that he would do anything for chocolate, and that he would drink WD-40 milkshakes. I don't know if you know WD-40, but it's a very it's an oil that's used to lubricate hinges and stuff like that. So, you know, this would be his milkshakes. He'd find these old cans floating through outer space, and he would drink them. And and then I started thinking, well, you know, how did he come to be? And thought about the planet, and thought about the planet being inhabited by these creatures, and then I sort of came up with this Genesis or Exodus story of him being um, kicked out, being on a search, and the phrase, you know, you see in all these old robot movies, search and destroy. The robots are always searching and destroying, and I actually liked the phrase search and create because he would, you know, this guy really wanted to create things. That was what made him happy. So I was playing with that for a while, and came up with the idea of him creating his friends. And finding, originally coming from such a depressed, lonely place where he's really rejected himself and taken on this label of being a weird misfit that the Nidbots have given him, he comes to realize, no, he's okay just the way he is. And he finds a friend, he finds a friend, Oxydog, and then creates his friends and sort of finds happiness through creating. So that's how it came about. It was really not something I ever intended. And then and then actually I was one day sort of thinking about the story, and it's going to sound ridiculous, but I was thinking about the story, and then I realized, wow, I've written my story. You know, I mean, this the story of his being a misfit very much mirrors how I felt as a young child in the U.S. My father was Hungarian, and so I grew up in a culture that was, even though my mother is American, my father was a very dominant influence, and so you know, I grew up in the U.S. in the late 60s and 70s, and you know, where everything is possible and you're always smiling. And here I was at home hearing stories of war and his escape in '56, communism. I mean, I didn't identify with any of the kids around me, and my parents didn't allow me to watch TV. So there was real divide, I think, between me and the culture. And not only, you know, this was taking place, but I think my father understandably wanted, you know, the best for me and wanted me to be a doctor, and yet I was not at all inclined that way. It was much more artistic. And so it was a gradual process as a child, turning away from art, um, being brought up in a culture that was different, very different from what I was excited about, and it took me a long time to come back to closer to who I was and the things I loved. And the first step, I did follow a pre-med curriculum and got my degree. That didn't work out, but I got my degree in economics, and then gradually started to travel back towards art through being a designer, which I loved. But that was also in service of others' needs. You know, you're providing service to corporations, and so, you know, it's been a long journey to come back to sort of finding what's inside and expressing that. And I think the more I've done that in my life, the more I've discovered what my authentic self, and what are the things that I love, the happier I've been. So that's really the story of how it happened.
Erica, thank you for sharing this very private story, but I love it, and I think it's a great point to make, where the philosophy and, you know, philosophizing about searching for authentic self meet life, everyday life, and I like those points. Um, I would like to ask the last question in this moment where I'm just asking you, introducing the Olibot and your person. The question will be about the philosophical message because our webinar is humanistic, is philosophical. So my question would be about your idea of this philosophical message, which is somehow rooted in Olibot. Is this searching for authentic self, or is there any other kind of message?
Well, I think it really is searching for one's authentic self. As I look around, my personal experience has taught me that for me, expressing who I am or finding ways to express who I am has has made me happy. That to me is the key to happiness. I think all of us have those innate gifts or desires or who we are innately, and I think as a whole, in society, we receive uh, conditioning from the day we are born not to be who we essentially are, and to more or less degree. But if I look around, I think there's such waste in just kind of following pop culture, consumerism, um, things. I think it's such a waste to society as a whole because what I find really interesting are, and I remember moving to Europe and, I would, there would just be lovely moments, things that you don't see so much in the U.S. because it's a culture that's very competitive and very much about, we don't have a good social system, so really one has to work a lot to live there to provide for oneself. But just seeing uh, old guys out there playing chess, or hearing someone playing a violin, passing by a window and hearing someone practicing the piano or singing opera, these things that they love to do that kind of get lost in it all. And I think kind of the social media has made this, and media in general has made this such a connected world where we are receiving messages about who's the latest, what's the biggest thing, and I mean this. Of course, social media has its very positive side. However, I really worry that I think it's a tremendous loss to society as a whole that we're becoming more and more homogenized. And there are, of course, currents where we're seeing, we're going from a broadcast model to a model that's more individual, where people like you can do this podcast that didn't used to exist. But I think I think really that the more that we try to follow or conform, or we buy the messages that we have to be uh, like other people, and I think kids particularly are cruel and very vulnerable to these kind of messages. They want to fit in, and I don't think fitting in. Of course, you want to be a contributing member of society, of course, but I think that fitting in and denying who you are, I don't think is a recipe for happiness, or I don't think it's the way to make a contribution to society as a whole.
It is a huge philosophical background and very nice reflection about all of that, what is happening also concerning social media, which is also a topic of our philosophical discussion during those webinars. And I read contemporary philosophers who say that actually right now we are so connected through all those media, but actually we are disconnected to ourselves. And
Yes.
I like this kind of description. But right now I want to play the role of philosopher because we have somebody here who represents philosophy. Chris, could you share your comment those topics on Olibot and your ideas and thoughts about the message which can be shared by Olibot as a philosopher. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. Let me say a few words about our project here at our webinars. At some part, in some part, we are trying to find out some philosophical elements as if transmitted by different forms of languages, right? So, for example, musical language can transfer or express some philosophical thoughts or emotions that can be converted into philosophical discussion. Film, cinema, right? Something like that. That you see a film and you look at the figures in the film and you see film as a philosophical message as well. Different arts can express philosophical dilemmas or philosophical questions and try to, I don't know if you answer these questions, but to put these questions, right? And I think fables, cartoons, and Olibot I've seen, they can also be as if converted into some philosophical problems. So what I see a lot of things here. I mean, in your presentation, I could see a lot of this stuff, right? And maybe it is not the most important now, but my question is, did you think about the symbolic meaning of colors you used for Olibot and these, guys beyond recognition, this army of mechanistic robots? Or did you think about the colors when you were composing them?
Yes and no. I didn't intend for there to necessarily be, he's white and the robots are gray, and it wasn't as though I intended to highlight his purity or innocence or whatever. However, color is a very important tool in art and design, and gray gives a certain feeling of drabness, of sameness, of monotony, and white is fresher. So it's a tool that artists use to convey emotions and touch emotions, and probably as I was doing the storyboards, and you have the planet out there floating in this immense void. Of course, to convey this feeling of loneliness, I picked more somber colors, and really my preference would be for brighter colors, but I felt as though I was really trying to convey a mood, so I stuck with that in developing the storyboards.
Yeah, and I wanted to know if was it intentional, because this white and dark symbolism is constant in the Western world. And when I saw this story at the beginning, there was this dark mass of bad guys, right? Like devils or something from the netherworld or something. And then this angelic person of Olibot having good features. It's the symbolism in the Western world. I'm not sure what it works in other civilizations, right? But in the Western world, the symbolism is perhaps even beyond the. I mean, the artists doing such
Possibly.
things does not have to recognize the power of the symbolism of culture, because the creator or author or artist can just transmit the symbolism she or he is within, this. So without even thinking too much about this, very often the artists transmit these powerful symbolisms in color or in other. That's why I sympathize with some theories that say that do not ask the author what he or she wanted to say, because usually he or she did not know exactly what this means. Because partially the author gives something from him or her, but transmits things as if beyond his or her recognition, because the power of culture she's been living in is so great that we don't have to realize that this type of symbolism, of this type of values, is omnipresent, right?
Yes,
So.
absolutely.
So when I saw this story, immediately it was kind of division by colors, or it was emphasized by colors, the symbolism of good and evil, and in the moral characters of your figures, exactly this gap is visible. Olibot is a good guy. I don't believe he or it, let's say, he does not have negative traits, right? The negative in
No,
some kind, because maybe he's fragile, he's sensitive, but we tend to think it's positive, right? And
yeah,
this, yeah, go on.
I agree with you. I mean, in my case, certainly, and I explained a little bit about how the story just almost came about, and then I realized that there was something inside me that I was expressing myself through art at a message that is important to me, but it certainly didn't turn out. It wasn't something I did consciously. I didn't sit down and think, oh, I'm going to write a comic about authenticity or identity issues. No, not at all. It just kind of happened in a very organic way. And Olibot himself is very much, contrast. He's white, and he contrasts with the gray robots. But it is an issue I've had with the other characters, however, because I have a few other characters there that are darker. I have Bladebot, for example, with the middle finger that involuntarily sticks up, and certainly the message I don't want to give is, hey, it's okay just to flip other people off, and some of the characters have that edgier side. Honeybot and Bladebot have that edgier side where they look like maybe they aren't such good guys. I would like to find a way to develop the story in the way so that they express this edgier side, but they are also members of a community that works harmoniously together. And there is actually a sub plot to Olibot that has to do with recycling and reusing, and the Ninbots go and destroy everything. It's a bit of a commentary on what's happening in our world today, and my vision for these creatures is that they go off and they form a community where each is valued for their difference, and they use their differences to construct a better world. And part of that is of course climate change and finding ways to reuse and recycle. So we'll see what happens with those edgier figures. It's a bit of a conflict I have at the moment, how to make that work.
Yeah, this is also, we were talking about colors, we were talking good and evil, but if I may comment more on this, I would say, referring to what you've just said, it must be intentional, but I don't know how much intentional, that you are stressing the constructive role of individual. Because, and the problems the good individual may face. Because in this presentation you saw, or not you saw, you showed us the problem of expulsion. This good guy Olibot was rejected by bad guys, so he was alone. He was as if kind of victim. But we feel sympathy to this guy, right? So we have the problem of rejection of a good person, good individual by bad forces, and we see that his individual, unlike them, these bad guys, whatever, right? And you show us your hope, but I think maybe your hope of the hope of your generation, that good individual can make a difference even when he or she is rejected by the group. And you give us this hope. This is very philosophical, I would say, or ethical, that you put stress upon individual who, even rejected, perhaps victimized, I don't know, is and sensitive and fragile and so on. He is or she is strong enough to construct something good, and he's gonna win because it's optimistic. You are, as in all fables or cartoons for children, usually, we have this good or happy ending, right? That even if the hero has problems, she's or he is strong enough to construct in the name of friendship, making a difference, building or contributing to creating a better world. So all this you you have in this presentation, right?
Yeah, yes, and I think the key to that strength, it seems to me, is being able to anchor to the self, and that's hard to do if you don't know who you are. But I think the more that you discover yourself, your identity, and the stronger that becomes, the more you nurture that, and can that enables you to filter out these messages that you get from society, such as you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not slim enough, you're not whatever it is, whatever it might be, you're not who your parents wanted you to be, whatever. That's why I think the search for self is very important. I think and an acceptance of the self. And all these creatures have flaws. They all have flaws, but we all have flaws, and it's learning to accept that and work with our strengths and our weaknesses. And I think that's really the key to building strong, healthy individuals and strong, healthy society.
Yeah, and this is, if I may, the third thing, the third strong point here is identity, or looking for the way to construct one's own identity. I think it's also a contemporary problem of the West rather than other cultures. When I have my students in the classroom at university from for example, Muslim countries, their approach towards individualism is very, very much different, very much different. So the conclusion may be from your story and maybe from the story of your generation that it's something that started in American culture with so-called transcendentalists. It is the end of the 19th century. A very famous person, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was trying to show philosophically the power of individualism, and then American pragmatism and so on. But let me say this: what kind of individual looks for constructing his or her identity? The one who has lost the traditional one. I mean, the traditional way of telling us who you are. In traditional societies, I'm not sure about that, but traditional societies or non-Western societies, usually it seems to me people do not ask such questions because they exactly know who they are. They belong to the tribe, they belong to family, they belong to a given clan. Women do not ask such questions because I think, because they know they should be mothers, wives, and in these conservative societies, I'm not sure if such questions are being asked. And I'm not telling this because I read some books, but because I talk to my students who come from these traditional societies, and they exactly know what to do. And when they come to Europe and they face this very different way of I don't know, giving roles, for example, for women, that you can choose whatever you want. If you don't want to be a mama, you don't have to be a mama. You can be single till the end of the days. If you don't want to have husbands, you can have lovers, as many as you can, And so this freedom, we call it freedom, right? You can do what you want within the limits of the legal system. So for many people, it is some kind of very new thing. But I think it's strong in your generation. In late 1960s and 1970s in the U.S. and in the 80s in Europe, maybe, or 70s in Europe, and 1980s, 90s in Eastern Europe. That this challenge that we have freedom, and freedom meaning we should look for self-definition or self-realization or self-fulfillment or self-definition again, and looking for identity, who we are, I think that you showed this a little bit in this presentation, the problem of the Western contemporary culture that we have to construct, because maybe we've lost something that had been for ages.
Yes.
Something like this. I don't know.
Yeah, you posed some extremely interesting questions, and of course, my experience. I can only speak from my experience, and I haven't been on the other side. I grew up in a culture and in a family where, my father was a refugee. He came alone to the U.S. So my mother left, was the first one in her family to go to college, and she went north, and they called us the Yankees. So we were not part of a large, we were not kind of ensconced in the womb of a family, and of course, I was born in Boston, moved to Chicago, moved to North Carolina, back to Chicago to go to university, to California. Have lived in several different countries. My experience is certainly not that of one who has been has played a role within a larger structure, and probably as perhaps your students find it a bit bewildering or frightening, or if not, that's certainly different. To be in a culture where they do not have societal and family expectations. I think we have lost something in the U.S. that's very important, and I think a lot of what's going on in the U.S. I think you can trace back to the reduced role of the family, and the fact that the wealthier the society is, you get to have your own apartment, go home alone, in your car without having to take the metro or the bus. You can be alone all you want. You can move. We're a society that thinks nothing of getting in the car and doing a road trip, and or moving to another city, or another state, another country, and I think this is the rootlessness that we feel, and the lack of identity. I think is directly attributable to that. And the problems that we're seeing. This is my conclusion, and I've always been somebody who strongly valued being an individual. That was very much part of my makeup. But as through the years, I have increasingly, I think there's a role an important role for society. And I have just come back from spending 4 months in Colombia, and it's very interesting to see a society and to live with people who are very much oriented towards their family and their friends and their community. And although I will never be Colombian, and I will never be part of that. I see the strength and the security that they draw on from that, and I'm a bit envious of it. Of course, I live in a different world, and I have advantages in my world. But I think meeting somewhere in the middle, combining the needs of the individual with a societal structure that's harmonious, and works for everybody. I think both aspects are very important, and we seem to be leaning towards one or the other in many places instead of finding the balance that we need.
Okay, so coming to the conclusion of our talking about this, I would say that I would love to see more. I mean, the continuation of this Olibot project, especially when you develop this personality. I mean, the figure with having personality, because I think it is possible to show by this language of cartoon figures some important issues, and it's fascinating for me because usually when people talk about philosophy, I mean the outsiders, they think that philosophy means very big books, and you have to read a lot of text all the time. And if you do not read big books or thick books, you are as if outside of the business. I think it's not true. I mean, the big books are just a part of this philosophical work. I mean, the language of big books, it is one of the languages, but there are many other languages and many ways of transmitting philosophical problems. As I said, film can be this type of language that shows the tragedy, for example, tragedy of life, or tragic life, for example, or love, or identity, or whatever. But cartoons as well. And it would be my dream, I don't know, to tell people that they don't have to develop the sophisticated language of big books, technical books about philosophy, in order to talk or think about philosophy. They can watch films or cartoons or listen to music and deal with some philosophical issues. By philosophical issues, I don't mean technical problems discussed by professional philosophers, but essential existential problems, yes. like good, evil. You know, all the time we have this in philosophy, right? We call it ethical problems, good and evil, identity, or the beautiful, for example. By the way, do you think Olibot is beautiful? No,
no, not necessarily.
It's an aesthetic question, right? Aesthetics deal with the beauty of, classical aesthetic needs to have the beautiful in the artwork, So if you, for example, want to ask questions about what is the beautiful, you can watch different languages, I mean, different arts that show the composition, and you can ask yourself, is it beautiful? And then one step further, it is a philosophical question. What does it mean that something is beautiful? Or what are, And so I would say that my final sentence here, we don't have to study terribly technically written philosophical books in order to deal with philosophy. We can watch many accessible works and ask questions like that. And I believe Olibot, or the Olibot project, can stimulate for this as well.
Thank you. We'll see where it goes.
Thank you. It is also a great conclusion to our webinar, but I would like to hear if Olibot is beautiful. Erica, tell us.
No, I think he's pretty funny looking. He doesn't really, he's got a metal body and he's got bird wings and a propeller. I mean, I don't think the Greeks ever really did sculptures that looked at anything like that. So no, I think he's on the side of funny looking.
It can be a joke, but in some classical aesthetic concepts, an important part of the beautiful was light. And light is very often shown by the white color, because it's close to light. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in the Middle Ages, there was so-called claritas, meaning the aesthetics of light. and they studied the role of light as a part of the beautiful. Without light or brightness, you could not have the beautiful. Maybe that's why Olibot, as a good person, is white. And in this sense, it is part of the beautiful, or the beauty of his personality in the classical sense, that beautiful was, in the classic sense, it is not just what we say, but the character of the person.
Yes, absolutely.
So for them, for the classics, a good person was a beautiful person. That's
Yes,
why
absolutely.
angels are white, right? Because so in this sense, we can have this a portion of philosophical deliberation. What is the beautiful in Olibot? Well, yeah, and dark or black in the classic meant wrong, evil, dangerous, unpredictable. That's why devil is symbolized in such colors. So and in your presentation, these terrible machines, ugly, they are ugly, and they are dark, and they are dangerous, and they are bad guys. So yeah, it is a part of this of this discussion about the beautiful. Yeah, I would say I will conclude partially. Yes, your figures are beautiful in some sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely gets to the idea of inner beauty. And the last slide, one of the last slides where, they're all good together and they say, it says they're weird, but they're awesome. I mean, this is the language we use nowadays to get across that concept of inner beauty, that what's on the inside is important.
Thank you for this discussion. I love this discussion between an artist and a philosopher. I love this notion and this exchange of ideas and concepts, because a philosopher talks with a philosophical language, and Erika, you as an artist, use language of art and nowadays language, current, the contemporary language. So I love the exchange, and I think this conclusion that we all philosophize in actually more than we think we are.
Yes.
It's a very nice conclusion for today's meeting. So thank you, and I hope we see each other, at least we all here, by the next webinar in exactly 1 month. Thank you, Erika. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.